I never liked surprises. It's not that I hate fun, or that I don't appreciate thoughtful gestures. It's just, I don't like the feeling of not knowing what's coming. Never have. As a kid, I used to peek at birthday gifts under the tree weeks in advance. In college, I'd read the last chapter of a novel before starting page 1, just to calm my nerves. Surprises throw me off balance. And Sierra knows that, which is why I should have known something was off when she said, "I've got something planned for us tonight." Her tone had that overexcited edge, just a little too bright, too practiced. I was halfway through cleaning up my inbox when she called, chirping about dinner reservations and wearing something decent. "Please." She added that last part like a joke, but her voice caught for half a second, just enough to catch my attention. Still, I chalked it up to her being in one of her creative moods. Sierra could be spontaneous. She loved elaborate gestures, themed parties, dinners with unnecessarily complicated seating charts. I figured it was a date night, maybe an anniversary redo. Something harmless. We pulled into the parking lot of this waterfront restaurant I'd never heard of before. A pier, spelled with an accent mark and all. It looked sleek and minimal, with hanging lights under awnings and a valet that bowed like he was auditioning for a royal court. I remember checking my phone before we walked in, half hoping one of my buddies had texted me about the game. Nothing. Inside, the hostess greeted us with a warm smile and a pair of flutes of champagne. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Mallory," she said like we were expected, which apparently we were. That should have been clue number 2. I followed Sierra up a short flight of stairs, expecting maybe a private table with a view. Instead, she led me onto a rooftop terrace where 24 people turned toward us and clapped. Clapped. There were white linen-draped tables arranged in a semicircle, string lights overhead, soft jazz playing from a speaker tucked behind a potted tree. The sun was just beginning to set behind the harbor, casting that warm gold hue over the whole setup. Honestly, it looked beautiful, like something out of a wedding magazine. And yet, I froze. There were photos of us, Sierra and me, arranged down the center of the table. Framed. Blown up. Not just *TS either, but curated moments. Vacations, birthdays, our first apartment. There was even one of me carrying a pizza box on the night we moved in together, looking like an idiot but smiling so hard my jaw could have cracked. In the middle sat a wooden plaque with cursive gold letters that read, "With gratitude." I stood there blinking, waiting for someone to explain what I was supposed to be grateful for. Sierra beamed beside me, gripping my arm like she'd just solved world hunger. "Surprise!" she whispered, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "I told you it'd be special. And maybe I would have believed it. Maybe I would have let my guard down, if not for him." He stood near the center of the crowd, back straight, drink in hand, wearing the kind of sports coat that costs more than my monthly rent in grad school. He had that polished, calculated confidence that made my stomach twist. Mid-30s, probably. Athletic. Clean shave. Eyes like polished glass. I had never seen him before. Not once. But Sierra made a beeline straight for him. She walked right past a cluster of her cousins and coworkers and threw her arms around his shoulders like they hadn't seen each other in years. I froze. Her body language wasn't casual, it was int asterisk mate. Familiar. Their embrace lasted just a second too long. Not scandalous. Not obvious. Just lingering. Enough to register in the gut. He smiled when he pulled back, said something in her ear that made her laugh, and then handed her his drink. She took a sip without hesitation. I stood there with a fake smile plastered to my face, clapping awkwardly as the guests began mingling again. Most of them were people from Sierra's work, faces I'd seen maybe once, at a Christmas party or a neighborhood cookout. Not one of my friends was there. No Josh. No Ethan. Not even my brother, who lived 20 minutes away and usually popped by uninvited. It wasn't our night. It was her night, and I was the accessory. I leaned toward her when she finally returned. "Hey," I whispered. "Who was that guy?" She didn't look at me right away. The guy you hugged just now. Tall. Brown jacket." "Oh." Her voice dropped into a practiced calm. "That's Ethan." "Ethan," I repeated. "Yeah, he's just an old colleague. she said, waving her hand as if dismissing a fly. We worked on a research grant together like 5 years ago. Her explanation was too quick, too neutral. The kind of answer you give when you've rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Before I could push further, someone tapped a glass with a fork. Toast time. And guess who stood to speak? Ethan. Of course. He cleared his throat, smiled in that rehearsed way people do when they want to appear humble and charismatic. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize someone truly remarkable, he began, eyes fixed on Sierra. She is the most driven, compassionate, and relentlessly brilliant person I've had the honor of knowing. Every single sentence dripped with layers. She gives so much to everyone around her, to her team, to her friends, to this relationship. He paused, glancing at me briefly, as if only just remembering I was there. And to this journey you two have been on. This journey. Not your marriage. Not your love story. Just a journey, vague enough to mean anything. I watched him raise his glass toward her, and she smiled like a woman being crowned. Everyone clapped again. I didn't. I stared down at the condensation on my glass, feeling the chill sink straight through the stem into my fingertips. When I excused myself to the bathroom, I didn't actually go. I stood by the railing, watching the lights shimmer across the water, trying to keep my breathing steady. I told myself I was overreacting, that Sierra had probably just wanted to be thoughtful, to surprise me, that Ethan was just one of those guys who said too much and meant half of it. But something about her energy around him, the way she glowed, the way she looked at him like he carried a secret only the two of them understood. It didn't sit right. I wanted to leave, but I didn't, because I wasn't ready to blow everything up. Not yet. Instead, I went back to the table, smiled when someone passed me a second drink, and watched as Sierra laughed at Ethan's jokes across the flickering candlelight. The whole night played out like a stage production, and I was in the front row, slowly realizing I wasn't the star anymore. Maybe I never was. The night of the rooftop dinner stayed with me. Not in the way Sierra probably hoped it would, with soft memories and warm nostalgia, but in the way a bad dream clings to you all day, tucked in the corners of your mind like damp clothes that won't dry. I went to bed next to her that night, staring at the ceiling long after she fell asleep beside me, humming lightly in her breath, like nothing in the world was wrong. But everything was. And once I started thinking about it, really letting myself look at it, all the little things I had brushed off in the past few months began lining up like dominoes, neat and inevitable. First, there was the yoga. Sierra had always laughed at the idea of it. I'm too fidgety to sit in silence, she used to say. But suddenly, just after New Year's, she was all in. 3 times a week, sometimes 4, always in the evenings, always at this new studio across town that she said was so relaxing, but never had much to say about afterward. When I asked if she wanted me to join one day, she laughed in that tight, forced way and said, "Babe, trust me, you'd hate it." Then came the wardrobe changes. Sierra's always had good style, but lately it shifted. It wasn't just new clothes, it was a new effort. Full makeup before heading out to run errands. Hair curled for a quick Target trip. Heels when she said she was just meeting a friend for coffee. I'd make a half joke about it. Trying to impress the cashier? And she'd roll her eyes like I was being ridiculous. Maybe I was. At the time, I told myself I was. But now, I wasn't so sure. She also started sleeping with her phone under her pillow. That was the one that really made me stop and think. We used to plug in our phones on the dresser across the room, her rule, actually. Something about better sleep hygiene. But suddenly, she needed hers close. I'm tracking my sleep, she said. There's this app that listens for REM cycles. And I wanted to believe her. I did. But she also never left it unattended. Not even in the shower. She started showering with music playing from a Bluetooth speaker, phone out of reach, but always locked behind the bathroom door. And it wasn't just the phone. It was how she used it. The way she'd angle it slightly away from me when texting. The way she'd smile at something on the screen, then quickly put it down when I walked in. I caught her once curled up in bed, blankets over her shoulders, face glowing blue. She didn't hear me come in. I stood there for a second too long. When she noticed me, She jumped like a kid caught sneaking candy before dinner. Working on something? I asked. She looked rattled for a half second before recovering. Just catching up on emails, she said, stretching the lie out like taffy. You scared me. Emails under the covers. At 11:42 p.m. on a Saturday. But I didn't press. Because part of me still wanted to believe the best in her. In us. Another time, I came home from work early. My last meeting of the day had been canceled. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. Her car was in the driveway, which surprised me. I let myself in as quietly as I could, like I always did, planning to sneak up behind her in the kitchen and wrap my arms around her like I used to when we first moved in. But she wasn't in the kitchen. She was in the bedroom, and the door was half closed. I heard rustling, fabric moving, laptop keys clacking. I pushed the door open just enough to see her sitting at the desk, wearing a different top than the one she had on earlier that morning. Her face looked flushed, like she had just been running. Oh, you scared me, she said, jumping slightly and closing her laptop with a loud snap. You're home early, she added quickly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I had a meeting canceled, I said. Didn't expect you to be here. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I wasn't feeling great, so I worked from home this afternoon, just trying to finish up some reports. I nodded. The explanation made enough sense. But the way she rushed to close her laptop, it stuck with me. At the time, I let it go. Told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just bad timing, nothing more. But after that dinner on the rooftop, everything snapped into focus like a lens clicking into place. Her laughter changed. That's what did it for me. I noticed it in the days that followed. The way she'd laugh at something on her phone, softly, under her breath. It wasn't the laugh she used around me. It was different, a bit lighter, younger. The kind of laugh that slips out when you're talking to someone who makes you feel like you're in on a private joke. She used to laugh like that with me. Now, I only heard it from behind a closed door or from the driver's seat of her car before she stepped inside. Even her silences changed. She stopped asking about my day, stopped giving hers in return. Conversations became transactional. Did you remember the dry cleaning? Can you pick up eggs? Did you walk the dog? Her eyes rarely met mine. Her touch grew absent-minded, like she was checking a box more than showing affection. It was like living beside someone who had already left the house emotionally, but kept showing up for appearances. And once I really started paying attention, it was all there. Signs I should have seen weeks ago, maybe months. There was a distance forming between us that she wasn't trying to close. She was just building furniture on the other side of it. The hardest part wasn't the lies, at least not yet. It was the way I started lying to myself in response. I catch myself making excuses for her. She's stressed. Work's been hard lately. You're imagining things. Don't be that jealous guy. I'd replay moments in my head and edit the endings. I didn't want to believe what my gut already knew. Until one night, I saw her standing in the hallway, back to me, talking softly on the phone. She didn't hear me come in. I was in the doorway, frozen. She had one arm crossed over her chest, the other holding the phone up to her ear, thumb brushing her lips absent-mindedly. No, it was fine. He didn't say anything, she whispered. Pause. Yeah, I think so. Just a couple more days. Another pause. A laugh. That laugh. Then she said, You're such an idiot. Stop. I'm hanging up now. I took a step forward. The wood floor creaked. She turned, startled. Hey, I said, forcing a casual tone. Who was that? She smiled just a second too late. Just Clara. From work. We're planning the summer fundraiser. I nodded slowly. That was the first time I knew she was lying to my face. No question about it. And I realized something else that night. It wasn't just that Sierra was changing. It was that I'd been letting her change without saying a word. I had been a quiet passenger in my own relationship, watching it drift off course while pretending we were still on track. But I wasn't going to do that anymore. I wasn't going to ignore the signs. Not after everything I'd seen. Not after Ethan. It happened on a Saturday morning. Sierra was getting ready by the window, brushing her hair in a slow, deliberate rhythm. She had that glow she got when she was excited about something, though she tried to keep her face neutral. That alone tipped me off. She was wearing jeans, a casual blouse, and makeup that looked effortless. Only it wasn't. I'd watched her perfect that look for years. This was careful. This was curated. "I'm meeting Claire for breakfast," she said, slipping on earrings. "And we've got book club after. I might be home late." She said it like a weather report, predictable, passive, nothing to question. But I felt something twist in my gut. Book club, right? I nodded, still in bed, pretending not to care. "Okay, have fun." She kissed the air in my direction, grabbed her bag, and left. The second the front door closed, I sat up. My heart was already pounding. Something told me today was different. Maybe it was the way she looked when she said, "Claire," or how she flinched slightly when I reached for my coffee. But the sense that today wasn't what she claimed dug its claws in, and I couldn't shake it. I told myself I'd just go for a drive, clear my head. But I knew what I was doing the second I put on my shoes. I didn't have a destination, at least not consciously. But as I drove, my hands gripped the wheel like they had a mind of their own. I passed familiar intersections, turned down side streets I hadn't thought about in years. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I had no proof, no real reason to doubt her, other than 1,000 small red flags flapping all at once in the back of my mind. Then I saw the cafe. It was a little place she'd mentioned once. Supposedly, it was where her friend's friend hosted her quirky reading brunches. I'd looked it up back then, thinking we could go together one weekend. We never did. But something about the name stuck with me, Delancey's. And there she was. I saw her before she saw me. I was parked across the street, hidden behind a delivery van. The cafe had outdoor seating along the sidewalk, shaded by those half umbrellas that make everything look cozy. Sierra was already seated. She wasn't alone. It was him, Ethan. He leaned in across the table, close, too close for anyone calling this a casual catch-up. He was saying something that made her laugh. That laugh. The one I hadn't heard in months. The kind of laugh that used to belong to me. His hand was on hers. Not just resting, but holding firmly with familiarity. She didn't pull away. Instead, she reached up with her other hand, almost absent-mindedly, and touched his neck. That soft, affectionate touch people use when they're comfortable. When they've done it 100 times before. It was instinct. Rehearsed. Not new. My stomach turned. I watched from behind the windshield. Breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. They weren't being careful. There was no urgency in their gestures. No glancing over shoulders. No signs of guilt or fear. They weren't slipping up. They weren't getting caught. This was their normal. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. My first instinct was to go over there, make a scene, call out her name and watch the color drain from her face. Maybe slam the chair out from under Ethan. Demand answers. Scream. Something. Anything. But I didn't move. I didn't need to, because the truth wasn't hiding anymore. It was sitting right there, under the morning sun, sipping lattes and sharing secrets. And it didn't care if I saw. Eventually, I put the car in gear and drove off. No destination, just forward. I didn't even check my mirrors. Couldn't. If I saw them one more second, I was afraid I might break. I drove for hours, past the city limits, into neighborhoods I didn't know. I stopped at a gas station, bought a bottle of water I never opened, and sat on the hood of my car, staring out at nothing. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the ease of it. The way she smiled at him, the way he touched her like she was his, the way the world didn't stop spinning for them the way it had for me. It was like I'd been erased from her life long before she actually walked out the door. The rest of that day was a blur. I don't remember where I ate or what time I got home, but I remember the silence when I opened the door. The way the house greeted me like nothing had changed. The same framed photo of us on the mantel. The same scented candle burning in the living room. A half-finished grocery list on the fridge. I stared at it for a long time. Eggs, spinach, dog treats. Like we were still pretending. I didn't tell her I saw them. I didn't bring it up when she came home a few hours later, acting like nothing had happened. She walked in, set her bag on the counter, kissed me on the cheek and said, "Book club ran late. We got caught up talking about the next pick." I nodded. I didn't flinch, didn't ask. She poured herself a glass of wine, curled up on the couch, and scrolled through her phone, humming under her breath. And I realized in that moment that something inside me had cracked. Not loudly, not like glass shattering, but more like the quiet split in a foundation. Subtle, permanent, irreversible. She had crossed a line, and I had finally seen it. There was a moment, later that night, where I caught myself watching her from the hallway. She was brushing her teeth, eyes focused on the mirror, like she was rehearsing a version of herself. The girl she showed the world. The girl who kept secrets under lip gloss and half-truths. I looked at her and I didn't feel love. I didn't feel hate either. I felt distance, like she was already a memory I hadn't processed yet. I went back to our bed that night, laid next to her as she slept peacefully under the same sheets we used to tangle ourselves in. I watched the rise and fall of her breathing and felt like I was lying beside a stranger. And still I said nothing. I didn't want her to know I knew. Not yet. Because knowing gave me something I hadn't had in months. Clarity. Power. While she was still acting, still performing, still believing she was outmaneuvering me, I had the truth. And the truth, while devastating, was also strangely grounding. It gave shape to my chaos, direction to my pain. I didn't have a plan. Not then. But I knew the pretending was over, at least for me. I was done wondering, done guessing. And now that I had seen it with my own eyes, now that the lie was no longer a theory but a confirmed fact, I could begin the slow, quiet process of walking away. Emotionally first, physically later. That Sunday, I didn't kiss her good morning. I didn't ask about her plans. I didn't make coffee or scramble eggs or offer to walk the dog. I watched her float through our house, talking about the weather, about laundry, about a Netflix show we should totally start together. And all I could think was, you touched his neck. Right out in the open. Like I didn't exist. I nodded along. I even smiled a few times. But inside, something was hardening. Something cold. Something permanent. Because the truth had finally stepped into the light. And now I couldn't unsee it. That night I didn't come home. Couldn't. After what I'd seen. The cafe. Their hands, the look on her face. I couldn't sit across from her at dinner and pretend anymore. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want answers. I didn't want another carefully worded half-lie that she'd deliver with perfect eye contact and just the right amount of casual warmth. I wanted space. So I drove. I didn't even pack a bag. I just got in the car and headed north. There was a dingy little motel off Route 15 that I'd passed 100 times before without ever noticing. It had a flickering neon sign that read, Oakwood Inn. The K was out. The kind of place where no one asked questions and the TV remote barely worked. I checked in with a fake name, paid in cash, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the peeling wallpaper until my eyes hurt. She texted me around 9:42 p.m. "Hey, are you okay? Let me know when you're on your way home." 10 minutes later, "Everything good? Just getting worried. You're usually back by now." I left both messages on read. I couldn't bring myself to lie, but I also wasn't ready to tell the truth. Not yet. There was something deeply surreal about sitting in that cold, barely lit room while the woman I'd built my life with lounged in the house we shared, completely unaware that the mask had finally slipped, that I knew, that I'd seen it. The silence between her last message and morning was loud, but I didn't mind it. I slept with my shoes still on. The next morning, I drove home around 7 a.m. The streets were quiet, dew still clinging to the windshields. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world kept turning. Kids waiting for buses, joggers with headphones, when mine felt like it had quietly crumbled overnight. When I walked through the door, everything looked the same. Coffee brewing, jazz playing on the speaker, her humming in the kitchen. She didn't flinch when she saw me, didn't ask where I'd been. "Morning," she said, pouring herself a cup like I hadn't just disappeared for 12 hours. That moment, That was the collapse. Not the cheating. Not the lies. Not the cafe. It was the normalcy. She didn't even blink. That's when I realized she wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the illusion. I didn't say much that day. I answered with nods, shrugs, and one-word replies. Yeah. Fine. Sure. I didn't ask how her night was. Didn't kiss her cheek. Didn't laugh at her awkward joke about the burnt toast. And she didn't press. Maybe she thought I was just tired. Maybe she assumed the silence would pass like it always did. Or maybe, just maybe, she could feel the shift, because something inside me had gone still. There was no explosion, no shouting match, no dramatic exit or slam doors. Just a quiet, irreversible disconnection. I stopped asking her questions. Stopped checking if she got home okay. Stopped refilling her tea when her mug ran low. Little things, the glue in any long-term relationship, things I used to do without thinking. And she noticed. She just didn't know why. That week, I moved like a ghost in our home. I went to work, came home, ate whatever was in the fridge, and slept on my side of the bed without a word. Some nights, I pretended to be asleep when she climbed in. Other nights, I stayed up staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the conversations we'd never had, all the cracks I ignored, all the times she looked me in the eye and smiled while living a double life. I didn't spy on her phone. I didn't confront her with what I saw. I didn't need to anymore. I wasn't looking for confirmation. I already had it. I had the image of her hand on Ethan's. I had her words replaying in my head. I might be home late. Spoken with the casual ease of someone used to hiding things. And most of all, I had her silence. Because as I withdrew, she didn't chase. She tried in small ways. She cooked my favorite pasta one night, lit the sandalwood candle I liked, put on the playlist we used to play during lazy Sunday mornings. I ate quietly, said thank you, but I didn't ask about her day, didn't reach for her hand. When she laughed at a joke from her phone, I didn't ask what was funny. I just stared at my plate and kept chewing. She noticed. I know she did. I caught her watching me sometimes. Confusion in her eyes, maybe even fear, but she didn't ask. And I didn't offer. That weekend, I took the dog for a walk and didn't invite her. Usually she'd come at least part of the way. But this time, I grabbed the leash and left without a word. When I got back, she was sitting on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her legs, flipping through a magazine she wasn't really reading. You were gone a while, she said. I nodded. Yeah. Silence. I walked past her, washed my hands, made coffee. She followed me into the kitchen. Stood there, like she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. I kept my back to her, pretending to scroll through my phone. You okay? She asked, her voice soft. Sure, I said. Another long silence. Then, you've just been quiet lately. I took a sip of coffee. Have I? She waited like she expected me to follow up. But I didn't. Eventually, she turned and walked away. I didn't follow. That night, I lay in bed with my back to her, eyes open, listening to the rhythm of her breath. I thought about how strange it was to feel so alone beside someone I once couldn't stand being apart from. I used to crave her presence, her voice, her laugh. Now all of it sounded distant, hollow, like a song you once loved that no longer moved you. There wasn't a single moment where I decided to stop loving her. It just faded, one act at a time, one choice after another, until I stopped reaching, stopped checking, stopped caring. And that, more than any affair, any betrayal is what ended us. I didn't need her to confess. I didn't need to catch her in another lie, because the version of her I had loved, she was already gone, and I had finally stopped chasing the ghost. If the quiet made her uneasy before, the stillness now was suffocating her. She started to unravel about 2 weeks after the cafe. Not all at once, Sierra was too composed for that, but in little unraveling threads. The kind of changes you notice only if you're watching closely. And I started with the way she looked at me. Too long. Like she was trying to read me. I could feel her eyes on me during dinner, in bed, while brushing her teeth. Her expression wasn't loving or curious. It was searching, like I was a safe she used to know the code to, and now the lock wouldn't turn. She asked how my day was again. I said, fine. She asked if I wanted to go see a movie. I said, maybe later. She cooked more, played old playlists, picked out the shirt I wore on our first vacation and casually laid it across the bed one evening. Felt like it's been forever since you wore this, she said, smiling like it was a memory we were both enjoying. I nodded. Didn't know you kept it. Oh, I keep everything, she said. She was trying. I could see that, but not in the way someone tries to make amends. She was trying in the way a magician scrambles when they realize the audience has caught on to the trick. She was pulling every lever she had, hoping one of them would still work. But they didn't, because the person she was trying to reach wasn't there anymore. I wasn't angry. That's what scared her the most. There were no arguments, no cold shoulders, no accusations. I still made coffee, still folded the towels, still fed the dog. But I didn't engage. I didn't respond with warmth or irritation, just silence, stillness. And for Sierra, silence had never been safe. She'd always thrived on motion, on interaction, attention, emotion. But now I was a wall, not an explosive one, not dangerous or spiteful, just unreachable, emotionally unavailable in the way she had once accused me of being during a stupid argument in year 2. The difference now was that it was real. She tried touching me more, a hand on my back when I passed her in the kitchen, a brush of her fingers on my arm when I reached for the remote. Her touch used to mean something. Now it felt like background noise. When she kissed me, it was soft, deliberate. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. She searched my face afterward like she was waiting for a verdict. I gave her none. That night, I heard her crying in the shower. Not sobbing, not dramatic, just quiet, measured crying. The kind that comes from realization, not pain. The sound of someone mourning something they can't admit to losing. She came to bed late. I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, she made pancakes, from scratch, with the little swirls she knew I liked. She even cut strawberries into stars, something she'd only done once years ago on my birthday. You hungry? She asked. Not really. You should eat something. I'll grab something later. She stared at the plate in silence, then slowly scraped the pancakes into the trash. I wanted to say I was sorry, that I appreciated the effort, that it meant something, but it didn't. Not anymore. The performance was exhausting, and I couldn't pretend to be her audience. Later that afternoon, she walked into my office. An odd thing, since she almost never interrupted me there. You okay? She asked. I looked up from my laptop. Yeah. She leaned against the doorframe. You sure? I nodded. I feel like you're far away lately. I paused. Do you? She blinked, clearly hoping I'd elaborate. I didn't. After a moment, she sighed. I miss how we used to be. That was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in weeks. But I still didn't say what I was thinking, which was, me too. But only because back then, I didn't know the truth. She stepped further into the room. I feel like I messed something up, she said quietly. I looked at her. For a split second, I wondered if she was going to come clean. If this was the moment. If she was going to say, Ryan, I've been lying to you. There's someone else. I'm sorry. But she didn't. Instead, she said, Is there something I should know? I stared at her. The irony nearly made me laugh. But I didn't. I just said, Not really. That night, she didn't come to bed. I heard the rustle of the guest room sheets. Heard her footsteps pacing once, twice, before she finally settled. The next morning, she was overly cheerful again, asking if I wanted to go to the farmer's market, if I wanted to make plans next weekend, if I remembered that dinner with her parents coming up. I said yes to everything and meant none of it. She was losing control and she knew it. But instead of confronting it, she kept trying to reboot the past. Like maybe if she recreated enough of our happy moments, I'd forget the truth. Like I'd wake up one day and believe we were still okay. She even dug out the old photo album from our trip to Vermont. left it on the coffee table like a landmine disguised as nostalgia. I flipped through it once, alone. Stared at the picture of her in the yellow sweater I bought her that fall. The one she swore made her feel like sunshine. Back then, she'd smiled like she meant it. Now, every time she smiled, I saw a filter. One evening, she came home holding takeout from my favorite barbecue spot, the one with the ridiculous 3-day brisket I always raved about. She'd even remembered the extra pickles. The gesture was so precise, so tailored to me, it almost worked. Almost. She set the bag on the counter. Thought I'd surprise you. I nodded. Thanks. She waited for more. I walked away. Later that night, she sat across from me in the living room, fiddling with a throw pillow. The dog rested his head on my foot. Are we okay? She asked softly. I looked up. Her face was searching again. I said, sure. She nodded slowly, but I saw it. The flicker in her eyes. The way her jaw clenched just slightly before she turned away. She was unraveling. The more I detached, the more obvious it became that she didn't know what to do without my attention. For years, I'd been the one chasing, checking in, reaching out, smoothing over tension before it exploded. But now that I'd stopped, she was directionless. I realized she'd never expected me to go quiet. She expected confrontation, anger, accusations. Instead, she got indifference. And that, more than any fight, was what broke her rhythm. I watched her sink into confusion, then doubt, then fear. But I didn't reach for her, because she was no longer falling away from me. She was falling into something of her own making. And for once, I wasn't going to catch her.